Great, thanks. Can you hear me okay, and can you see my screen okay?
Yes and yes.
Excellent. Apologies for the siren, of course, that has to happen. So here's the KBase main page, and as Tim said, you can sign up for an account here. You just click on the sign up button. You can sign up with a Google account. You don't have to make a new account and remember a new password. You can sign up with Google. You can actually log in with your ORCID ID, and I highly recommend that. We are now a paid subscriber. We're a member of ORCID, and we're going to be using the push-pull function with ORCID. So anytime you publish an article in KBase and get a DOI for it, which I'll talk about later, it'll actually end up in your ORCID account and vice versa. So if you already have a KBase account, I'll show you how to link it to your ORCID account. If you don't have an ORCID account yet, I would recommend getting one. Also, you can follow us on Twitter at DOE-KBase, and we'll be tweeting throughout the week for this course as well as we're going through this. So once you've logged in, I'm going to give you a quick demonstration of what it looks like in KBase. And so here is what we call the KBase Dashboard. The KBase Dashboard lists your narratives here, any tutorial narratives that we might have made public, and we're actually going to be updating a lot of these quite soon. And then narratives that someone has shared with you, for example. These are one of the key things about KBase is that you can actually bring in data and keep it private, and you can share the narratives with your collaborators before making the narratives and all of your data and information public. So KBase really does a nice job of allowing you to upload private data, interact with that data, compare it against all the public data in the system, and I'll show you some of what we have already. Share it with collaborators so you can iterate on it, and then make it public so that you can share it with the entire community. So we allow various levels of sharing as well. And these are all public narratives, and once we start finishing the morning of this course, all the public narratives will be listed here. And so I'll put links in the Discord chat once we make those public during the next lecture after the first hands-on session for the morning, but you can always find them under public narratives here. There is an organization, a KBase organization for the summer school course. Right now it's only restricted to the students so that we can keep it somewhat contained and maintainable. But anyone should be able to find it if you go to all orgs here and you search for summer school. Then this organization will pop up. And all of the narratives that we'll be using are held inside this organization. And so right now you can see we have the summer school students here because we're going to be actively working throughout the whole core. I'm just going to open up the chat and make sure everyone can hear me okay. Yeah, so we'll make this available to everyone afterwards. You can just request an invitation and I can authorize it when the class is over. And then all of the narratives that we had for the whole week are in one location, and you don't have to go back through the public narratives to find them. Okay, when you're going down to your account, I'll show you real quick when you log in with your account how to link across accounts. So if you already have a Google account and want to link your ORCID so that we can make sure to give you credit where credit is due when you start publishing narratives in KBase, you go to your account down here and then you sign in, and you can actually just link any of your accounts here. We do also allow Globus login, and I'll explain what that is for a little bit later, but that's really because of any large file transfers over 20 gig, we ask that you use Globus just to make it a little bit easier. Okay, so when you go to your dashboard and you open up a narrative, I have one open here already that I'm going to use in a demo. You just click on one of these links, it opens it up in a new tab, and this is the narrative that I'm going to use just to sort of walk you through how a few things work in KBase. A quick reminder, we have an upcoming webinar on the 22nd of July on genome announcements in KBase, how if you actually isolate a genome and you want to go through and assemble it and annotate it, similar to what Kelly was talking about, but for a single genome, for example, we're going to have a webinar on that on the 22nd of July, and you can register at kbase.us/webinars. This demo narrative is currently public. It just has a bunch of data in it and cells through it, but I wanted to walk through a few steps just to show you the parts of the narrative. The narrative is basically built on top of a reproducible Jupyter Notebook instance. So every time you open up a narrative, it spins up a Docker image of that, and that allows you to do reproducible narrative analysis that when you share it, someone can actually go through and see exactly what you've done and reproduce your results if you need to. So a few components of the narrative, just to get everybody on the same page. This is the narrative sort of main space where all of your analyses and reports come out. This is called the data pane here. And to add data to the data pane, you click on the red button. And you can either upload data directly, drag and drop from your desktop computer, or like I said before, if it's over 20 gigs, we ask you to use Globus to upload data. You drag and drop the data, it shows up here. It's only in there for 90 days. You actually have to import it into the data pane. And one thing about KBase is there are certain data types that we ask you to actually identify the data object as when you import that. If you have any questions, please email us. We're happy to help you with some of that if it's not super intuitive. But you can see that there's FASTQ reads, for example, that you would get off an Illumina sequencer. You would upload those, and you need to know if it's paired end or single end, and then you just import it, and it ends up in the data pane here. It's also possible to get public data. We have NCBI RepSeq genomes. We have several databases from the JGI, including Mitochondrium and Phytosome. And so there's a lot of public data already in system as well. And there's also possible anyone that's actually shared data with you that isn't public is available in the shared. So just click on that and it ends up in the data pane. The other part of this is the apps panel. And these are where all of your analysis tools are. So for example, Kelly was talking about assembly. We can do an iterative search on assembly, and it actually will show you all of the different assemblers that are available in KBase. And then you click on one of those, and it actually loads it into the data, into the narrative itself, just below the cell that you were working in before. So from here, you would go and you would select a reads library. You would set the minimum config length, and then you would name it, and then you would hit run. And then that would run to our servers, and then we would run offsite. When you submit an app, it actually auto-saves it. And so you can then close the narrative, walk away, go make dinner, and come back in a couple of days to see if your narrative is done with the assembly. Again, the assemblers are the biggest load on our system, so please think about the assemblies and make sure you do your QC beforehand so that you're actually putting good quality reads into the assemblers, because it is very, very memory intensive. A couple of other components is we have these nice markdown cells where you can see I can actually add documentation to the narrative, put in web links, etc. To add one of those, it's just down here, add a markdown cell. And it actually, again, just puts it under the cell that you were working in. You can double click to edit and make any edits that you want directly to there. We have some templates for Markdown. If you're not familiar with Markdown, we can provide you template coding for some of that as well. We also have a button down here called Add a Code Cell. We do support Python 3, and so if you have some small code that you need to run inside the system that we don't have an app for, that's what this code cell is for. Again, please reach out and contact us if you have any questions. All right, so what happens when you are running an app and you want to know where it's at? There is a link here. Checking the job status in the link goes actually to, and I haven't run anything this morning because I've been pretty active in watching the lectures, but it actually lets you know the jobs that you've submitted in the past week, in the past 48 hours, in the past hour, and it lets you know the status of it and which server it's run on. So you can actively check to see what your status is of the jobs that you're running from that link. And I'm going to try and make sure that we're staying on time. How are we doing? Okay, great. The other component to that I wanted to make sure to talk about a little bit is we have a new feature that we're calling narrative publishing, where actually when you go through the narrative and you get it all cleaned up, nice how you want it. For example, this is going to be one of the Urbe Pour Water narratives that my group is going to be working through. So it has all the markdown cells, it has questions for the students to work through as we go through all of the data. And say you have this and you want to actually publish your narrative. We have an example here. This is what a published narrative actually looks like. So all of the narratives in system where you're sharing narratives and doing analysis require you to log in so that we can make sure we track who is doing what for the username so we can return the jobs for you again. One thing to note about the publishing is that this is now outside of the KBase login. It's indexable by search engines such as Google, and it allows you to actually put in a full workflow so you can share it with somebody, especially if you're submitting a paper, for example, to a journal. You can actually have it be publicly available outside that. It lists all of the data and all of the citations for the apps that you had in there. We are now working with OSTI, which is the U.S. Department of Energy Office of Scientific and Technical Information, to provide DOIs for these narratives. So I can actually get you an OSTI record for a DOI, and that DOI for this publicly available narrative is now available. Is now available for submission with your publication. And so if you have a data availability statement, you can include a DOI link for this entire workflow. If someone comes to this workflow and wants to actually interact with it or do something, they can, for example, say they want to go and look at what the assembly is. They click on the assembly. Then they need to actually log in to view the data or to view the narrative itself. So if they're curious about this particular data object that was in the narrative, I've now logged in, and I can actually go through and see what that data object was, what went into it, and then it has a link to the actual narrative where all the analyses were done. A quick note on some of the other buttons up here. There's the share button. This is how you can make a narrative public, or you can provide view or edit privileges, or you can also add it to an organization if you're the owner. And then finally, if you, for example, are in a narrative where you don't have edit privileges and you see this view only mode, but you want to take that narrative and rerun some of the analyses, you hit the copy button, and it will make a copy with your username so that then you can go through and add new data and run analyses and reproduce the exact same workflow that you had found in the publication. And so those are some of the features. I think I'll try to leave a little bit of time for questions if anybody has any, but we're really excited to be supporting the summer course, and we're very happy to promote KBase and help anyone in the world, since we have, I think, 17 countries called in today, to be able to do open source analysis for free.
Awesome. Thanks, Elisha. That was great. You got some good questions. And again, some of them are getting answered over here in the chat, which is great. But one question that I don't think got answered yet was, is KBase built upon Jupyter in a way that allows you to import packages, other packages such as NumPy or TensorFlow, to do other types of analyses?
Yeah, so we do have some Jupyter packages in, and if you have specific ones, I can look those up for sure. I don't know off the top of my head, but we do try to run a lot of our things through analysis applications. And one thing I didn't mention is that if anyone on the call actually is a developer and wants to build a tool, for example, so Mike, who's in Kelly's lab, actually put DRAM, the annotation tool that we're going to use, into KBase about a month or so ago. So we do work actively with people to be able to wrap these tools so that they have a nice user interface for that. I can check on those packages in particular if those are ones you're interested in. But yes, we do have some Jupyter packages enabled in system.
Great. And I thought it was real interesting that you have DOIs now available for the narratives. That's awesome. Somebody asked, is it possible to make the data private until publication? I'm assuming they mean in KBase.
Absolutely. So all of the data that you upload into KBase is by default private. We have no access to it. Only people that you share it with have access to it. We see the size of the data, but we never actually see the actual data until you make it public. So it is private until you explicitly make your narrative public. Okay,
great. And when you make the narratives from the tutorial, from the hands-on sessions with the student groups available, will those show up? How will they find those in KBase? Will they just show up in the public area?
Yeah, they'll show up in the public narrative area. There's a couple of there already, but I will make sure to put in a series of links into the Discord as well once they're all publicly available.